Welcome back to another exciting episode of Two Guys and a Stack of Comics, coming to you live from San Antonio, Texas at Dragon's Lair Alamo Ranch. It is Friday night, and Reed and I were just, I'm Mike, that's Reed. Reed and I were just talking about what's going to happen with the
DC universe.
The DC universe. Like, everything's getting rebooted, and we're kind of like wondering, what is it going to be like? And we were just going on about it. I was like, we should record this. This would be great for the show.
Yeah, no, I think it's one of those things where DC has had some massive missteps, and so we know James Gunn's rebooting, and kind of we were talking a little bit about what we'd want to see, kind of what we think would get DC back on track as far as their movies, because I think pretty much everybody can agree at this point what they've done has not worked thus far.
Except for the Pattinson Batman.
Yep.
That was pretty cool.
And that was good.
And the Wonder Woman.
Yeah, no, they've had some individual hits, and I think that's the big problem.
And the Aquaman.
Man of Steel was good too.
Man of Steel was pretty good.
Every time they would hit a home run, the next movie they would kind of strike out. And I think three movies, yeah. I mean, they've been on a cold streak lately with even like a movie that I liked, like Black Adam, which is a movie I personally thought was very good. Didn't do well at the box office. Shazam didn't do well at the box office. The Flash didn't do well. And so it's one of those things.
I'm still crying about that.
That was tough. That one was tough to take. And I think that's what DC is hopefully going to have to do with James Gunn, and this is just what they could do to actually reboot this and get it to work and kind of create a coherent universe that people are excited about each movie as it comes out.
And then Reed said they're going to have to just start fresh. Yeah. And of course, I know they're going to start fresh. But then it was like, what about Wonder Woman? What about Aquaman? Those ones did well. They're still coming out with. Well, I don't know if they're going to do another Wonder Woman.
I think Aquaman 2 is still this year, and then there's Blue Beetle, and yes, I would very much miss Gal Gadot being in movies, but I think
Could she just have like her own universe, like Pattinson?
Just kind of do her own.
Reed said they'll probably have to cast a new Wonder Woman. Like, no.
That one does sting.
Don't recast Gal Gadot.
But yeah, I think a fresh start's probably the first thing they're going to have to do, and I think it's going to be as hard as it is to see like Momoa and Godot and Henry Cavill and a lot of the folks who have done well. I think the universe they have just has too much baggage at this point. Even for all the highlights they've had, they just have not been able to create a constant Justice League.
Then we were trying to revisualize, like, okay, so if they redo everything, are they gonna have to redo the origins?
Yeah, I think the thing is, at this point with the comic books, we've seen so many origin stories. I think one of the things they could do kind of to save money with these movies would be just, I think you look at back like the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies. They kind of told the story of the previous movie in like the credits through like using art. I think as a comic book fan, that'd be really cool if they used an artist like Alex Ross, or maybe using classic panels to kind of show the origin story, unless the origin's really going to tie in really deeply into the movie.
Because then we had the whole argument, do they need to redo the origin stories? I mean, everybody is going to go see these movies kind of knows are they going to have like a new Batman Begins?
Yeah.
Are they just going to stay away from Batman because they got the Pattinson Batman and that one's going pretty good? I mean, what are they going to do?
Yeah, and I think the thing is, like, Gunn's announced a bunch of movies that he's going to do, but I don't know how many of them are actually going to get made because of the way DC's doing. So I think the origin stuff is really, at this point, everybody knows Superman's origin, and you can really tell that in like 30 seconds, right? We don't need to see the Waynes get shot in an alley again for like the 18th time. Like, even the Batman, which was a new continuity, kind of sidestepped that. There's hints at who the Waynes are and what happened to them, but you don't really get like a detailed, scene. So I think unless it's a brand new character that we've never seen on screen before, or it was a long time ago, I think you could mainly bypass a lot of the origins.
I like the idea of the comic panels during the opening credits. Get the origin out of the way and let's get into the story. So as far as the catalog goes, what do you think would be good if they were going to dig for a new Superman story?
Well, I think they said they're starting with Superman, and I think that's the only one that's cast, and we know that's the only movie like officially with a start date. I think the thing is with Superman, and we've done a lot of talking about the Flash movie that came out, but the key for that is really just going to be tell a Superman story. Don't worry about a DC universe yet. Like, have the Superman story focus on Lois and Perry and Jimmy and Lex Luthor. We don't need a Batman cameo. We don't need a Wonder Woman cameo or hints or allusions to Green Lantern or whoever else. Like, actually tell a story about Superman. And I think it's one of the interesting things that I think DC could really do to be successful is focus on the characters. Mike and I are both, huge fans, and like we talk about our favorite characters, and Mike is the Flash, mine is Batman. But even though I say that, like, Batman's not actually my favorite comic book character. My favorite character is Bruce Wayne. If Bruce Wayne switched identities to, Dark Detective or something like that, and someone else became Batman, I'm not reading Batman anymore. I'm going to read Bruce Wayne's book where he's at. And I think Mike's kind of the same way as far as...
Yeah, with Barry Allen. Like, who Barry is, the scientist, and, his love interest, Lois, that was like the complete character that moved...
Iris West, he said Lois.
Oh, I said Lois. I meant Iris.
Yeah.
That was like the complete character, like Superman and Lois, like that builds the Clark Kent character just like Iris and Barry. That's integral part. And like we were saying in the new Flash movie, that wasn't even a part of the character. Like where the CW got it right is,
at least they had some focus on Barry's life.
Iris and Barry were the center of that character and made that character more like Barry Allen, which is what a Flash fan really wants to see.
One, I think that's what Marvel has so much success with early on. I think Marvel's struggling now, but when you go back and watch the early Marvel movies, the Iron Man movies focus so much on Tony and Pepper and Tony's friendship with Rhodey and Happy, and like the Captain America movies focused on him and Peggy Carter, and Thor focused on him and Jane Foster, and it really made you care about those characters.
And then the superhero part is like the action part, which is where you get your action part of the movie. But as long as you got to have that character, and you got to have his life be interesting, like Peter Parker and Spider-Man. Like, his life is interesting. His love interest is interesting. It keeps the story going.
That's a huge part of it.
And it keeps it grounded.
Well, then you care because there's stakes. Like with Peter Parker, and I think he's probably been the most consistently well-done movie superhero character in movies, is because they do such a good job with Mary Jane, and they do such a good job with Jonah Jameson and Flash and the other characters, that it really feels like his civilian world is always in danger. Whereas so many other characters, and like I hate to keep kind of bragging on the Flash, but like, why did we really care about Barry Allen in this last movie? We had no idea of what his life looked like. We had no idea of what was at stake for him really, other than the obvious part with his mom and dad. But his modern day life, we didn't really see anything that was all that vital.
So in building the new DCEU,
DCU or whatever they're going to call it at this point,
the entertainment universe, the cinematic universe, you got to stay grounded. You got to keep the characters grounded. There has to be a mix between the action, which is the superhero part, and the character part with, which brings us back to Superman and Lois. Like, I don't think that they've cast.
They've cast both Superman and Lois. Those are the only two so far. And
so who's going to play Superman?
I think it's a guy named David Corn Sweet, and then Rachel Brosnahan's Lois. And who knows what either one of those folks are going to do. I'm sure they're cast well.
But what story are they going to pull out? Like, what would be new and exciting?
The cool thing is you have so many years of Superman to mine to use stuff. And that's the cool thing is, like, Superman, in all honesty, that he's had some movies since basically the 70s, like the late 70s.
Yeah.
They've never done a story where he fights Brainiac. We've never actually seen Lex Luthor done really properly. Like, Lex is almost kind of like a con man, or someone who's like ripping people off, or kind of weird, like he was in Batman vs. Superman, where he was this very strange, eccentric person. Lex is like this really powerful businessman. Like, can we get Superman fighting Lex in the actual like mech suit from the comics?
That would be kind of cool.
And I think that's just kind of use some of those stories they haven't. We don't need to see Zod again. We've seen Zod a few times already. We don't need to see Doomsday. And the other thing is, like, just have a plan for the characters. I think that was the coolest thing that Marvel was successful at early on with the MCU, is you could tell things were building to something.
But you could see a stumbling block if somebody got excited and say, ooh, Doomsday was a popular comic. Let's do that one. That would not be a good jumping off point.
Yeah, no, not to start off. And I
Yeah.
think that's the thing is like the small scale stuff always kind of works, and it always brings me back to like the movies that I really loved. And it's, a lot of the Spider-Man movies are very small in scale normally. It's normally like Peter and then someone he knows is in danger or someone he knows becomes a villain, and that gives it that emotional tether. And I'm not saying you need to make all the villains like someone the hero knows, but give us a story actually about them. And that's another thing I think that DC's really messed up on is the villains in their movies are one-dimensional beyond belief. Other than like the Batman movies
Right.
that have been on their own, but like Dark Flash in this movie, the Flash movie, you didn't really get much of why that happened. He kind of just went crazy. Zod, you got a little bit about that, but not much. The Ares villain, even in the good Wonder Woman movie, there wasn't a lot about why he was how he was.
Yeah.
When you look at like the successful ones, right? Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin, the
That was
Joker
a
with
good one.
Heath Ledger,
Heath Ledger was a good one.
Alfred Molina as Dr. Octopus, right?
God, that was classic.
There was so much time spent with the villain so that when you do get that fight at the end, you understand how you got there and why you're there.
So what do you think? What do you think they're going to pull for a Superman story?
I think you got to do Brainiac. I think that's probably the best.
It hasn't been done before.
Hasn't been done.
Well, in the CW.
Well, I mean, I'm sure they've done it on like Supergirl or something. I don't know. I didn't
Right.
watch that show, but I think that's the one untapped villain they could use that would be new, that would be fresh, that would distinguish this Superman. And
I'm just trying to imagine a rebooted DC universe, cinematic universe. I'm just trying to imagine. And of course, you start out with Superman.
Yep. And I think you
and
just
you
go
don't
a couple
have to go to
characters at a
Batman
time.
because you've got Pattinson's Batman off to the side.
Yeah, and Pattinson can kind of be in his own universe. I think the thing is I think they need to pick just a few characters at a time. And I know Gunn kind of came out and announced like 10 different characters.
And then there's Green Lantern,
Yeah,
which really hasn't been done,
not Justice, no, that awful
right?
movie we got.
And in the and so I mean, I could see him going Superman, Green Lantern. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think Green Lantern would be an interesting
Untried
one.
territory.
Especially if you
Really?
wanted to get, and I think like Green Lantern would be another character. Like the first movie focused so much on CGI. No, just tell a story of Hal on Earth getting the ring and getting adjusted to it and kind of seeing it here. And then maybe at the end he goes to space. And I think that's another thing I want to see DC do is quit with all the CGI. The CGI can look great at sometimes, but like recent Marvel movies that have come out, and even The Flash, the backgrounds aren't good enough anymore that we can see and it blows our minds. You can tell when they're on green screen. And it's funny because you go back and look at comic book movies from like 10, 15 years ago, like the original MCU movies.
The original Spider-Man.
The original Spider-Mans, the Batman Dark Knight trilogy, the Batman, they had way less budgets, but that you could tell they were actually like shooting on location at times or like had
More
detailed
location
sets.
shots, yeah.
If I gotta watch one more time that a character falls into a parallel universe that's all CGI, it's lost its mystique, and it's for the Flash, like you can just tell the entire movie they're in this CGI background. It's like you really couldn't find like an open desert to have people like do the fight scenes, like you had to CGI that in, and that's I think that's getting just less and less tolerance from that
Maybe
for
it was a
people.
budget thing because it's more expensive to film on location, but it's worth it.
Well, the thing is, they're spending so much money on these movies anyway. I mean, the other thing I hope DC does is give your movies a chance to be profitable. Like, I loved the Black Adam movie because I thought there was some really great scenes in it, but it had a $200 million budget. You're never going to make like $600 or $700 million on a Shazam villains movie.
That was kind of hubris
Yeah,
at that point.
it was crazy for them. And I know they had The Rock in it, and they probably thought that would carry it, but you've got to give the chance for these movies to be successful. The Flash having a $200-something million budget. It's the first ever Flash movie. There's not a lot for a general audience to connect on yet. So you just got to do a better job of kind of manage your budget and give yourself a chance to be successful. And what's crazy is you go back and look, and I think like the Batman had a half the budget that the Flash did. And it looks better and made a ton more money because
It
you can
had a
tell.
good visual feel to it.
One, it's because
I
they
think
relied on the
that-
story.
I think, yeah. And I think the Batman movie, the Pattinson Batman movie, could be shades of what what's to come if they do it well.
Mhm.
You know, follow that.
Follow that kind of distinct. I think that's the other thing is let your characters be distinct. What I've always loved about DC, and I think this is why I've always liked DC more than Marvel. I like Marvel, but where I've always thought DC was great is Batman has a distinct feel. Gotham is this kind of rain-soaked, dirty streets, kind of gothic nightmare.
That's what you love about it.
And then you go to Superman in Metropolis, and it's bright, and it's always sunshiny and futuristic. You go to Wonder Woman's thing, she's on these
Themyscira.
beautiful islands in Themyscira. The Flash is in Central City, which just looks like a modern kind of thing. You have Green Lantern up in Oa, where it's like this space thing with all these creatures. And what was always cool to me is they all felt distinct. And then when you did see the characters come together, it was kind of cool because it's like Batman looks out of place with the Green Lantern thing in the Green Lantern planet. But that's kind of part of the story.
Yeah.
Of what makes them cool is like all of a sudden they're there. When you see the Flash show up in Gotham City, it's kind of cool because like he doesn't look like he belongs
He doesn't
there,
quite fit in, exactly.
and that really adds an element to the story.
Yeah, I think so. So I think if they're going for a guiding perspective, they could look to how the Batman was done and why that movie did well, the way it looked, the way they handled the story.
Mm-hmm.
I think that could be a good guiding light for a reboot of characters.
Almost all their characters.
Yeah, they're
And
going to redo Superman, and I think Green Lantern would probably be
Green
nice.
Lantern would be great if they can do it right. And I think the other thing is follow the source material and kind of let the characters be the character.
Yeah.
What's interesting is like, and I think we've seen this finally kind of reach a critical mass with Marvel, is all of the characters at a certain point become too similar. They're all kind of quippy jokesters, and you can't do that.
Yeah.
Batman should be super serious. Superman should be hopeful. Wonder Woman should be inspiring.
Yeah.
The Flash should be science-based and very factual and maybe a little bit nerdy but incredibly smart. Hal Jordan should feel kind of like the Top Gun pilot kind of thing where he comes in and he's just sort of taking risks.
Yeah.
Don't turn Barry into a jokester just because, the movie needs humor. If you need humor in the movie, throw Billy Batson in as Shazam.
Yeah.
And he can inject the humor, or throw one of the Robins in and have them be a young kid and have that. But the comedy does not work. And I think this is what Marvel did really well early on, is like Thor was funny in some of the movies because he was a fish out of water. He's on Earth, he doesn't really connect.
Comedy worked better in the Marvel universe, whereas DC was always, and has been for 30 years, like really dark. And that's why the Batman movies worked so well.
Yep.
And it could be too dark, but then you could tell they were fighting with the comedy because they were trying
They're like,
to...
we need to put a joke in here.
Yeah, we need
'cause
to
we haven't
match
had one in a
Marvel
while.
somehow. No, not necessarily. Not every movie has to have... Not every superhero movie has to have comedy in it.
Well, and I think you can
There
get
was nothing
different
funny
things.
about the Batman,
No,
but it was still good.
it was still a good movie. And I think that's the thing, is if you tell a story that's consistent with the character, the audience
There
will
you
be
go.
okay.
Yeah.
Like, Superman should be a very hopeful movie about a guy who's just a good person doing the right thing.
Or trying to.
Or trying to, in a world that kind of rejects that notion.
Yeah.
And how does he grapple with that?
Or is untrusting of it.
Yeah.
I think that would be good. Like, make a hopeful Superman movie. Keep it rooted in the story. Don't worry so much about the effects. Of course, you have to have good effects.
You have
with
to
a
have good
Superman
effects,
movie.
but the thing is, if you tell a great story, you can have the effects be in a couple of scenes. And what's interesting is the action scenes in older comic book movies, when the budget wasn't there as much, actually hit harder because it was a surprise, right? Like, I will always remember being in the theaters watching Spider-Man 2 and being so amazed at that train fight sequence between Peter and Doc Ock. And it was because the majority of the movie had been like little conversations, and Spider-Man would pop up for a little bit, and then bam, all of a sudden you get this extended, awesome choreographed action scene. And it worked because we'd been so invested in just the story that when the action got there, it felt earned.
What was it somebody once said about the first Superman movie? Of course, everybody wanted to see Superman fly.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't know if they were really going to be able to pull it off in 1978 whenever they made it. And they said, well, we really didn't need to see so much that Superman could fly, but could Christopher Reeve pull off playing Clark Kent and Superman?
Mm-hmm.
And he did. He had a performance for the ages, and that's what people loved about that movie was, Christopher Reeve's performance.
Well, and that's what kind of
And how we
sticks
brought the
with you.
character into it,
Well, no, it's like funny is like I don't remember the plot of all of the Iron Man movies, but I know I enjoyed the heck out of every single time Robert Downey Jr. played Iron Man,
Yeah.
and whether he was
In the suit or out of the suit.
every single time he was on screen,
Yeah.
whether it was a conversation or an action scene.
You just wanted to know how he was
You
going to
enjoyed
act
it.
and how he was going to react. So yeah, I think if they follow that, model, I think they'll be more successful this time around.
Well, and I hope ultimately the biggest thing that I would stress for them to kind of wrap everything, go slow. You don't need to get to the Justice League immediately. You already tried that and it didn't work.
And don't try and build up to another Endgame DC style,
No,
because that's not what this is about. Make one good movie at a time. If the characters come together and things work out, and you get to do a Justice League /
Awesome.
thing in the future, awesome. But yeah, do them one at a time.
Well,
Do them well.
Feel free to keep making movies. Like the biggest thing DC messed up on is like Man of Steel did well. It's 10 years later, we never saw a sequel to that movie that was focused on Superman. We
That's
saw a
kinda sad.
Batman versus Superman movie,
And
but
Henry
we never see it.
Cavill was really good.
No, and he deserved absolutely better. And it's funny, one of the things I feel bad that they're rebooting and that like so many of the actors DC had actually did a really good job. They were just handed bad scripts. Like it's funny because Ben Affleck just always seems to run into these things where like I don't think he was actually a bad Daredevil. It's just no one could have been a good Daredevil in that movie. That script wasn't going to allow it. And like,
But it was still cool to see Daredevil.
oh, it was great to see it
on
the
big
first
screen
time.
back then.
And I
Weren't
think
you
the same
stoked
thing.
to see that movie?
Yeah, no, I remember us being like 13 or so when that came out. It was great to go see it.
Oh
And
yeah, it was awesome.
same thing that happened to his Batman, where like it was going to be really hard to make the torturing kind of want to kill Superman Batman likable.
Yeah.
And then he never got his own movie to really flesh out the character, and so that's kind of all you got. So I hope they just go slow, but they're deliberate,
Make
build a good movie.
One good movie at a time
If the Superman
The
movie's a
script
huge hit,
is key.
yeah. No, that's the other part. Is like sometimes
Don't be afraid to throw away a bad script. And go,
or it
"Nah,
feels
I
like
don't
they
really
think
wanna
the
work with
script's
that."
an afterthought. Like, oh, well,
Yeah.
they'll come for the cool CGI.
They
It's
they
like,
cast first. They get the CGI set up,
and then write it.
Well, we can mess around with the script. We'll tweak it later. No, start with a good script and then build around that, and I
Yeah.
think it'd be good.
No, and like if something's a hit, make a sequel, right? I hope the first Superman movie does well, and if it does, I don't need to see Superman Batman team up. Do
No.
a Superman 2
Yeah.
or Superman Legacy 2 or whatever it's going to be called, but just go slow, be deliberate, take your time, especially because we've already seen what happens when you rush movies out, and I think that's kind of what's almost killed Marvel right now is Marvel's rushing so much content out that it doesn't have time to breathe. And by the time we're in July, we've already had, 2 Marvel movies this year? There's another on the way, there's already a TV show, and then it sounds like slower than last year. Like, let your content have some time to breathe, let people really fully kind of get invested in it, and hopefully that'll lead them to success going forward.
All right, we'll call it there for now.
Mm-hmm.
We'll come back in a little bit and talk about our stack of
Our
comics.
stack of comics and what we're looking forward to with the coming week. But thank you, as always.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.
Like, share, comment below.